wish somebody would love me like that. I would be really stoked to get a letter like that. Like if it was from a chick, but written by a dude and still from a chick, that would still be sick. But it would have to be a sensitive dude. It would have to be like a dude like you.
Back in 2013, Chris Pratt said trans rights, I believe.
Oh, God. I can't believe it's really surprising to see him in this movie. Her,
I had no idea. I totally forgot.
Isn't it bizarre? It's sort of like, yeah, because he's changed so much since then. And like, this is a movie I think too that like people forgot about, right?
Oh yeah,
I feel like it's totally forgotten, oddly, but we have not forgotten it because it's kind of in our wheelhouse, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's a very specific sector, I think, of millennials that have
100%.
not forgotten it.
You had to be a certain age and have a certain predilection, if that makes sense.
It's an interesting word like, for this series of episodes, but yeah.
Sad boy millennial emo movie, I think you call it. So this is the last episode of Risqué Romance, which has been kind of a long marathon season cycle for us because a lot's been going on. Let's do we got to intro the show. Hey, This is Film Trace, guys. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a movie from conception to production all the way to release and reception. It is the final episode of Risqué Romance. We are covering two films. The main film is Bones and All, which came out late in 2022. And then our chaser film is going to be Her, which we heard that clip from, which came out in 2013. Where to begin, Chris? Where to begin on this journey? Because this is the end of our journey,
right?
So we kind of have to really sum it all up this episode.
Yeah. I think maybe we should do that up top this time, especially because this is I believe our first cycle of episodes where we, instead of starting with the new movie and going backward, this time we reversed it because we knew we wanted to do Bones and All, but we wanted to get going on recording. Yeah. So we began actually with Stanley Kubrick's Lolita from 1962, paired that with Taste of Honey. Once again, thank you for introducing me to that lovely movie.
Great movie, isn't it? Yeah.
1961 British film, kitchen sink realism, some landmark representation of LGBTQ plus communities and characters. And then in the 70s, we came to Terrence Malick's Badlands, which actually, Bones and All, turns out, has been often compared to.
Yeah, definitely.
And Harold and Maude. Then in the 80s, we focused on Valley Girl and My Beautiful Laundrette, once again looking at everything from class to LGBTQ plus issues. Same thing with Bound and Poison Ivy, which brought back the whole Lolita trend in filmmaking. And last but not least, before today's episode, Brokeback Mountain and Secretary from the 2000s. It has been quite the journey, and I think we knew that this was going to be a very difficult topic to look at through the course of the latter half of the 20th century and early 21st century cinema. We had some great guests along the way. Gary from Cinema Shock talked Badlands with us. Our good friend Bridget from Screen Time talked about the 80s with us. Lillian Crawford, LGBTQ plus cinema expert, talked about Bound and Poison Ivy with me. And then Amanda Jane Stern, writer, director, star of her own movies, talked to us about the 2000s. And I was actually, maybe this episode's going to blow everything up, but I've been very impressed with how we've been able to talk about such delicate subject matter. Not to toot our own horn, but...
Well, it sounds like you're tooting our own. I think it's funny. I wanted to do something in romance, right? Because it's something it's a genre we really haven't covered on the show all that much. Mm-hmm. Like even in the first 5 seasons, we didn't really do a ton of romance films, even though, I don't know, I really like romance movies. And it's also, I think we chose a mountain to climb that was like difficult and it's fun to do. That's why I chose Lolita as the first movie, right? It's like, if you have to walk through a minefield, you have to sort of be limber and dynamic and think in a different way. If you had chosen we end up like talking about Her, which is such a movie that's so easy for us to talk about. But it's not just that, it's not the romance part, but also just two straight white dudes.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, I think in this exploration, we wanted to sort of step into different perspectives and kind of see the idea of romance from different viewpoints. And I think we managed to at least, we did it to some degree. But it's always hard to really dive into something like this. And I think we are pulling something out of it for at least us, right? And
yeah,
kind of
totally.
how we're viewing these movies. And I'm glad that we chose to end with Bones and All and Her, because I think that like they're both, I don't know, they seem easy to think about and discuss. There's not a lot of like hurdles that I have to jump over to talk about Bones and All or Her. Like there's almost like it's kind of reflecting back on us a little bit, and how we view romance and how we view love and stuff like that. I mean, first of all, do you want to dive into Bones and All? Do you want to start, rip off that Band-Aid?
Yeah. We've been keeping from each other for a bit now our true opinions on this film. So let's just get that out of the way, and then we can do the whole tracing thing and talk about where this movie came from and how it managed to get into theaters and how it's been doing the past month, which I think is maybe a little different than perhaps people were anticipating back when we chose to end the season on this movie back in November. So what hit me, Dan? How did you feel about Bones and All? Tell your journey. What made you interested in having this be kind of like the touchstone movie? I threw it out there along with a lot of other suggestions, but you seemed to latch onto it pretty easily.
Well, there's a lot of buzz. I forget what film festival it came out at, but there was a ton of buzz surrounding it. And I don't know if that's because like Timothée Chalamet has such a following, like he's basically like the Tiger Beat of 2023, like he's on the cover. You know what I mean? Like he's just like that guy. And so there's so much buzz, especially on film Twitter. And Luca Guadagnino, who's amazing, Call Me by Your Name. This is his follow-up. I think it's his follow-up to that, isn't it? Technically, yeah.
No, Suspiria.
Oh, Suspiria came after. Okay, yeah. Which is also fun. Crazy as hell, but I like him. I like his style. Call Me by Your Name is one of my favorite movies. Cannibal aside, boom. And I don't know. I also felt like this. So I was interested in it, but I don't choose films just because I'm interested in something. I wanted to choose something that was going to be zeitgeisty, that like younger people, Zoomers would be into, and like just fast. Because I always want to like figure out what's going on.
We're endlessly chasing the Zoomer audience on this show.
100%. Chasing the dragon, as they say. And so. Yeah, I was just, and the concept of it was so fascinating to me. Like, I get there's been so many of these sort of like, I for some reason lumped it in with like zombie movies. Is that wrong? It's like immediately, it's like, is this like a zombie love movie? Didn't we already do this?
Right.
They're not really zombies. They're just, people that like a certain type of meat. And I don't know. I just, it felt like it was going to have a lot of cultural cachet and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't. It just doesn't. Like this thing landed not with a thud. It cost like about $20 million to make, production budget wise. Obviously, a lot more to market. It's only done about $14.5 million worldwide. Mm-hmm. So it has not set the world alight in terms of an audience or financially. And I don't know. My initial, are we diving into our opinions? Do you want my opinion of this movie?
Yeah, I need that before we go anywhere else. Otherwise, it's just going to drive me nuts.
I didn't love it.
Okay.
Didn't love it. It was right in sort of the style that Luca loves, that very sort of naturalistic flowing shots, long takes, beautiful music. Great acting. He's so good with actors, especially Timothée. And there's a lot to love about this movie. Number one, it's very long. It's 130 minutes long. It could have been cut. You could have cut 30, 40 minutes out of this thing easily. Mm-hmm. There's so much on the surface, audio wise and visual wise, that you just is there and apparent, and it's very good. This story is complete trash. I mean, there's not even a story. Like, I don't even know. The crazy thing is this thing is based on a novel, YA novel, which makes way more sense because you're like, YA novels are usually not that good, actually, from a literature perspective. High art, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's just, this story's not there, which is so, I don't know. It's disappointing because I think all of the pieces are there they're just not arranged in the right way. What did you think about this, Chris?
Yeah, no, I mean, I knew I didn't see it on your top 10 list of 2022. So that was a little bit of a spoiler for me, but I mean, I'm, on one hand, I wish I could argue with you more, to make our closing episode a little more climactic, but I can't. It's not a great movie. It's not bad. I don't know.
I don't know if that's true. It might be a bad movie. It might be a bad movie because, like, think about it this way. Do you ever want to watch it again? No.
I'm never watching it again.
It's too long. It's boring as hell.
But that's the thing is, like, a movie that's a truly bad movie, I might want to watch again.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Like, bad.
Because they're fascinating to me, either because they're like so bad they're entertaining, or because like, it elicits a negative emotion from me. And like, I don't think I liked the Suspiria movie, the remake, but
that's also not very good. Like, the last half hour of that movie is a complete. I mean, compared to the original, whatever, I get it. The opening hour of that movie is super fun, though. Suspiria. But you also didn't like Call Me by Your Name.
I haven't seen it yet, so.
The whole. I was in Columbus yet.
Oh yeah, I've seen Columbus. Yeah, you're just listing movies that you like that you've been wanting me to see.
No. It's like these like romantic movies.
Columbus is great.
Why did we do Columbus? So I guess there's nothing risque about it.
Nothing controversial.
Like architecture and small towns. Is that risque?
Yeah, but I mean that's one of the issues I think with this whole kind of subgenre that we've been tackling is that it is very difficult to nail because I mean love is. Yes, it's got tragedy embedded into it, but also has like this wholesomeness embedded into it. And so a lot of these films, and I think including Bones and All, with as extreme and ridiculous as a premise as it has, it's still trying to like hit that like wholesomeness mark, right? And even though they're these damaged individuals with this horrible predilection, to use your earlier word, they still have a true connection with each other. But that, I mean, we didn't even do a log line for this one because it's just so bare bones, pun intended. It's just two cannibals that meet each other and fall in love and try to escape the law. And other cannibals. Oh my God! Don't even get me started on Mark Rylance.
Come on! I thought he's such a good actor, though.
I hate him so much.
God, is he a good actor? Chris, have you seen Bridge of Spies yet?
It's the same exact character, except in this one he eats people. I'm quiet and weird. No, it's the log line is I think that the interesting part about this, and it's funny, people said this about the book too. Like apparently the book starts out really, really strong and like world building, and then it like really falls apart in the last third or whatever. Which I think you can say the same thing of the movie. You got a young girl who is. I'll say the opening is incredible. I really like the opening.
What's the opening again?
Where
she goes to the party.
She makes friends and goes to their party, and and then it's.
And then someone loses the digit per se,
right?
And I like that too. Yeah, like she gets abandoned by her father. Her mother's part of the whole sort of situation. It might have been passed down to her. Maybe it's genetic that she has this sort of taste for human flesh. She goes on the run looking for her mother, and then she comes across Timothy's character. The lead of this movie is really Taylor Russell. Right, she's I think she's phenomenal. She's such a no. See, here we go. We're gonna get into it now because I think she played this part so well to me. What don't you like about her? Give me 3 points.
Well, I maybe I shouldn't be blaming it on her because Luca. I'm just gonna call him Luca G because I am not good with pronouncing this guy's name. He saw Taylor Russell in Waves. Which was. Did you ever see Waves?
I've never seen Waves.
Okay,
it looks amazing.
I love it. It's a really great movie. It has its haters, and arguably they have reason for disliking the film. But I really was captivated by it. It's by the guy who did It Comes at Night, Trey Edward Schultz.
Oh yeah, okay, absolutely.
And she's phenomenal in it. And she really like has this kind of I feel like this is a common thing. It's been a common thing for over a century now in cinema, right? It's like that ingenue quality, like her inexperience actually helped her kind of fit into that role, you know, where
Sure.
because she is so fresh and so green with it, it just comes across as really like pure and special, because it's like, you know, minimal trained actorness. And we'll get into that when we talk about Joaquin Phoenix. But but then in this movie, and I think the other thing is, like, in the movie Waves, she has a character that has so much, you could say the same thing about Bones and All, except it never really delves, right? It just is all like surface level.
Yeah,
because and there's glimmers of, I think, definitely promise in her performance, but I don't know if the script ever lets her really do anything other than just be like vaguely tortured.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but I think she does a lot with what she's got given there. Like, even on the surface, it's just there's something. She has a screen presence, and I hate when people say that. It's like, what the hell does that mean? I don't know what it means. It's just a term that we use for something that we feel when we see somebody on screen. Like, that's literally what it is. You can't put it. You can't be more specific about it. She just, I don't know. I think she really, she flowed well with Luca's style, which does tend to be flowy. It's loose, super long takes, and it's just like, she could be in it. I think if she could stay in the part long enough in those scenes to really inhabit what was going on. And Chalamet is the same way.
Yeah.
What do you think about him in this? He is such a talented young guy.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I want to be a naysayer, but it's really hard to be.
It's super hard to be. He's
really, and I mean, that's the other thing about this movie is, like, I think not only did he show once again that there's a reason why he's kind of becoming the face for his generation, but also he had a lot of say. He was a producer on this. This is his first time producing one of the movies that he starred in, and he like had a lot of say in the script and the kind of improv moments throughout shooting and giving feedback on dailies and stuff. And like, once again, not a good movie, but like he made some interesting choices. Like, he was basically the brains behind that whole scene where they listen to the guy's records, and he finds the Kiss record, which was actually one of the more like kind of interesting and like more than just like vaguely tortured vibe that you get throughout so many scenes in this movie. And he also like had a big part in the music, both in giving notes back to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who have, you know, made it to the point to like they're just as, you know, reliable as some of the more classically trained composers in the film industry, as well as like the pop songs like Leonard Cohen and Joy Division and all that stuff. Like it, and we should note that this movie takes place in 1988. Is that right? 89?
Yeah, somewhere around. It's like, it's a period piece.
Yeah. And so like that part feels like really lovely and lived in, but it's just like, it's the whole thing. Like, I don't know if there's another director besides Terrence Malick that can like have just vibes be something more than just vibes. Is that ridiculous?
Malick, the ultimate Zoomer filmmaker. Nothing but vibes, dude. All comes back around.
Right.
There's a lot to even just digest with the conception and production of this movie.
Yeah.
I think the thing that stuck out, one of the things that stood out to me is in these interviews, and that we can say this because we were both alive in the Midwest in the 1980s. We grew up in the Midwest in the 1980s. They keep on saying Midwest in the interviews, but that's a hint. Okay, so if you're not from America or whatever, the Midwest is a pretty precisely defined area of the country. And this movie sort of takes place in it sometimes. Like, it does take place in Minnesota, right? That's where her mother is and stuff like that. But it takes place in Kentucky, Maryland, which are both not part of the Midwest.
Right, Virginia.
And then there's like other shots and stuff that look like more like the Great Plains areas and stuff like that. I think the one thing that stood out to me, and I think like one of the reasons that Timothée took this movie, is he's sort of like, oh, Luca's going to make this like Midwestern movie. He's going to do whatever he wants, like in the middle of America. He's like really excited about that concept. That's the one thing here from the start that seems probably not super smart, is that Luca's trying to make a movie about a place he doesn't know anything about in terms of just like 1980s America. He doesn't know anything about. That'd be like me making a movie about 1980s Italy. Like, I don't know anything about it. Like, I might be interested in it, and I might have a story to work off of, but it's just going to be very hard to capture it. Does he capture it? No, he doesn't.
No.
Like, he captures a fairy tale version of what he thinks it was like back then, but it wasn't like that at all. I mean, it just wasn't. Like, sure, the same cars and maybe the same haircuts and same clothes, but the way people act is not the same.
Yeah.
And so, like, right there, it's sort of like, okay, I'll give him creative license to do that. But then there's this whole thing. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but like, if you're going to do that, like you said, it has to be some kind of like, that's the thing, is the movie tried to do the whole like have its cake and eat it too. Like, it wants it to be this like distorted, fantastical version of reality, but also like have a really naturalistic setting. And it just
the grotesqueness of it.
Right. Exactly.
Hyper grounded. Right. It's like Tom Savini stuff.
And to add to your like point about like the kind of disingenuousness of the filmmaker coming at it from like an Italian, perspective, to Midwestern America, like, you got your two leads, and I've said good things about them, but I also have to just like note, like, yes, Timothée does the best he can, but like, he's got the face and physique of like a New York rich boy. Like, he's not. He's not a Virginian. He's not a Midwesterner. And Taylor Russell too. Like, she's Canadian. She does not. Neither of them feel like they fit in this.
They don't fit
at all.
No. And someone kept on saying like, oh, if they're eating like 80,000 calories in the human body, like they're not going to look like two, heroin chic types. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't. Yeah.
But then they also eat like lots of other food. I don't know. That was.
Yeah. Well. Then we have to. So I got curious.
Oh no! You didn't make a spreadsheet, Dan, did you?
I did not make a spreadsheet. I got curious though, because I was like, something feels off to me, and I couldn't figure, not off as in wrong, but like it didn't make sense that like, here's this really cool arty movie based on this YA novel. Well, how old is the novel, number one? And two, who wrote it? What was their intention? So I went to go look that up. And it's a 2016 YA novel. And it's fascinating because it's by Camille de Angelis, who's about our age. She's born in 1980. But it turns out she is a pretty militant vegan, and has been for like the last 11 years, a vegetarian for a good 20 years. And so that's the one thing that I sort of, when I was reading reviews of the novel, there's this whole group of people who would be like, yeah, it's okay, but it's basically a book about veganism. Right? And that's the whole thing. And then you watch the movie and that doesn't come through at all.
No.
Like, there's no sort of like vegan agenda in this movie, which it sounds like there might be a little bit of that in the book. I mean, so the author self admits that she wants people to read it and become vegans. She said that in like a blog post. But like, you don't get that in the movie. So there's almost like this story has just been sort of hacked up, rearranged, digested, and spit out into something different.
Good one. You've had that locked and loaded, haven't you?
It just comes to me naturally.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the tenuousness of the adaptation process, right? This is the same guy that helped Luca remake Suspiria, and I forget his name, David K, another last name I'm not going to try to pronounce. He definitely, like, seems to be some intent, and you get like, once again, a very surface level response kind of across the board from both the cast and Luca in the press circuit interviews about what is this a metaphor for.
What is the metaphor?
And I'm not saying like you have to have a movie that's strange and then therefore there has to be like a metaphor that you have to unpack. Like, I'm the number one David Lynch stan, so I'm not going to argue that. However,
in this case, I think you could argue that in this case.
In this case, I think it's so like both in your face and like simplistic that it just like screams at you like, what do I mean? And there isn't an answer. Like, the best answer I saw that Luca gave, and he only gave it in one interview. I forget which one. Maybe not Slant. Of Daily Beast. And I don't think this is a good answer, but it's at least the most coherent and specific answer he gave that I found, where he said he's always wanted to find the balance and tension between character and place. That's particularly relevant to this movie. they do not have a place, but they have the vastness of America and of the Midwest. It gets better. It gets better. It gave me the idea of a place that has endearing beauty and suffering of communities that I can see were left behind by a very difficult system of economies.
Oh my! This is so okay. Like I love you Europeans. You're great, but there's an intellectual class in Europe that views America through such a specific lens. And it's usually a Marxist lens, and it's like, that's cool. I'm a fucking Marxist. I love that shit, but they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Like when you say, like, this is complete gibberish.
Right. Well, it plays into your whole thing about like this complete misunderstanding and just like assumption of what this particular part of America is all about. And just like I mean, I was thinking like halfway through the movie, once not having halfway, like 20 minutes in, once you like figure out that it takes place in the 80s, because it doesn't, even though it has like title cards for about every state they go in, it never explicitly says that it's the 80s. And so then just like when I figured that out, I was like, is this one of those things where they chose the 80s because they didn't want to have to deal with this whole cell phone thing and that's it? Or is it like, is this about Reagan? Like, how many?
Is this like, maybe it's like a homage to George Romero or something, like Day of the Dead, because all that stuff. Well, I don't even know what to do with it.
It's a mess.
It's a snow globe world, which I respect though, but like, it's easier. It's easier to do it like this, where it's like, kitschified, like 1980s culture. The weird thing about this is you watch this movie, like you said, and it doesn't explicitly state it. It feels like it could have taken place in the early 2000s based on how people dress back then, or people dress now. Like, you know, because constantly looking back at the 80s, 70s, all that kind of stuff. I do respect that he wants to create a snow globe, you know, enduring beauty, as he calls it, world. But like, you know, there's a way to do that, and that's Wes Anderson. Call him up. He knows that he can do that in 2 seconds, right? Like he can do that for like an American Express commercial, which he's asking for. You know, and I think Luca it just feels wrong-footed. You know, the whole thing, and it's I don't know. I think it's unfortunate because there's just so much that could have worked here that doesn't, and then. You know, I think let's loop back to the metaphor, because I think that's really important to getting at the heart of this movie and how it fits into this whole Risqué Romance thing. How would you describe describe to me, I'm now the teacher, you are an English student in 9th grade. We're going to swap roles here.
Love it. What's
the central message of Bones and All? What do you think the metaphor of cannibalism is talking about?
Well, if that's the thing, is like I don't know necessarily about like cannibalism specifically. I would have to chew on that for a while. I'm just, oh my God, we're gonna do this all day.
All day, it's lovely.
But like, and I think this was actually Taylor Russell said in an interview, and it's really the only thing that makes sense to me. Is the concept of being an outsider, of being a nomad. Like that part like really felt true. Like I almost would like this movie a lot more if it was just about like, you know, a 18-year-old girl whose father deserted her and she had to like find her way in the world, and she comes across Timothée Chalamet. Like that's a not only a simpler expression of it, but like just the whole thing of like the cannibalism, because like you said, it's treated more like a zombie, at least when it feels I don't know. I don't know. Can you tell me now? So this is the 9th grader floundering in class discussion, and the teacher just takes over and says exactly what the metaphor is.
It's a physical embodiment of an emotional question. That's what Taylor Russell said. I'm just stealing. I'm doing like the author notes or whatever. Those lecture books.
Cliff notes, yeah.
That's what she says. It's a physical embodiment of an emotional question. Okay, let's try and unpack this though. So they're eating other people. Okay, is that like their emotional rage? Is this like a movie about trauma?
Yeah, because she's searching for her mom, who also
left her. Yeah, right? She's like has this rage of being different.
Yeah, an outcast.
Yeah, she's an outcast. But none of that really. Okay, here's there's a moment where this movie has, I think, had a chance to sort of maybe say something better. or more interesting is the moment that they both kill the carnival worker guy. And they find out that he has a family and a kid and all this stuff. And there's sort of this guilt involved, but that just sort of dissipates later or pretty immediately. And I'm like, no, like that's the moral question. The moral question of this movie should be, I have to eat people, right? I think that it's wrong to hurt people. How do I reconcile those two viewpoints?
Yeah, and even though I disliked the Mark Rylance character and Mark Rylance in general, like at least there that was like a sliver, like a glimmer of something, because you know he did that whole monologue about how he senses when somebody is about to die, and that's how he decides who's going to be his next meal. And it's like
moral.
There's a moral code there, right? He says that like I've got a code. It's a dumb code for a pretty dumb movie, but it's like at least there was something being worked out there that just gets abandoned. But then spoiler, it should be pretty clear at this point, but then I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin for me in terms of like what I got out of this movie was when Mark Rylance comes back for the big finale, and it's
so terrible.
It's
finale
just
of this movie. I mean, it ruins any goodwill that build up, and it's just like, how does it make any sense? Like, I don't, what?
Yeah.
And then like who gets hurt in this at the end and dies? Is it Timothy or her?
Yeah, and Timothy does, and then he says, "Feed on me."
Spoiler alert, by the way. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It's so heavy-handed, but there's nothing there to be heavy-handed about.
Right.
And I think I don't know. It's a frustrating movie to me that the more I think about it, the kind of worse that it gets. And it's not like a terrible film.
No, like you said, it's beautiful to look at. The music's lovely. The performances are solid. It's just...
I feel we're going to have a lot to say about Her. So I think we should transition to Her, because...
For sure.
That is a movie that I think we both saw when it came out, right? I imagine we both liked it when it came out.
Actually, I don't think I saw it in the theaters, actually. I think I ended up, because it came out right around the time my first son was born.
Okay, yeah.
So I had to wait for home video. I believe this was a classic Chris Redbox.
Little DVD action.
Oh, yeah. But yeah,
so what'd you think on the first release? It's 10 years old now. Right,
yeah, 10th anniversary. And, you know, I was... definitely like any white millennial, like enamored by Spike Jonze in the 2000s, right? Like I loved being John Malkovich, and so like I was just like ready because this was his fourth and still his only feature since. Right,
he's not done a movie since this,
right? Other than the Jackass movies,
my mind is blown because
I know
Where the Wild Things Are in 2009, and then he did adaptation in 2002, and being John Malkovich. And the guy had obviously he's doing 1,000 different things, but you know what I'm talking about,
right?
Like, it's
just home run after home run, yeah. So yeah, I was excited to see it. However, I greatly disliked at the time, and still kind of don't really love today, Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay.
And so it was
your mouth, huh?
Yeah. And I don't think I think I like Scarlett Johansson more now, and I liked her more before this movie, but I think right around that time too was also just like, I don't know how great of an actress she is. But I will say that coming out of this film, the one thing I remember is like, even though I still did not like Joaquin Phoenix and I wished it was somebody else in the lead role, I really loved ScarJo's performance. I think that I didn't love the movie when I walked out of it, but it left me like thinking and curious about the world and technology and relationships, and I think that was kind of his goal. And he ended up winning an Oscar for it, Best Original Screenplay.
Oh, I didn't know that he won that.
He won that, and he clearly was uncomfortable at the Oscars. I distinctly remember that. Like, he kept his speech pretty short and quiet, and it just seems like of the four movies he made, yes, this maybe was his, because he worked so closely with Charlie Kaufman, and then he also worked very closely with Dave Eggers for the Where the Wild Things Are adaptation. So this was like his, 100% his vision. And I don't know, something still rang difficult for me back then, and it still did a little bit today, though I think I like it better today. I don't know. Your turn. What's been your journey with Her?
So Her is part of my Love is Dead film series that I watch every Valentine's Day. Because, so I'll give you the movies. Her was a more recent edition, I believe.
Okay. Blue Valentine.
Blue Valentine is so here's what you do. You start with Blue Valentine because that's the hardest one. You got to get through that.
Yeah.
You get through that, and then you watch probably Her would be good as like a sort of come down chaser. Then you do Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and then you close it out with 500 Days of Summer. Because you want to end on like kind of like a hopeful note. You don't want to like actually love this day.
Two good movies, two bad movies. I get it.
No, all genius movies. So yeah, when I saw this come out, I saw it in the theater, I believe. And where was I? I was in New York. Yeah, I lived in New York. Yeah. So I probably saw in some, art house theater there, like I was wont to do. And it hit me really hard, I think. I was like, oh yeah, this feels accurate. This feels right. This is how I struggle with romance and love and all of those things. You're trying to connect with people and it doesn't work. I was also dating a ton of people in New York. It's like just what people do there. You constantly go on dates with people. And it kind of, it seemed very, it hit home in a lot of ways. On the rewatch, it plays I still enjoyed it, but it seems way more complicated than when I first saw it. And I feel the same way about, like 500 Days of Summer as well, like a movie that I loved when it came out, but now I watch it and I'm like, wow, this is strange and problematic and complex in a way that I don't think was intended by the author at all.
No, that movie re-enters the discourse like every year too.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where it's just like Her doesn't though. For whatever reason, Her
skates by.
It just doesn't. I don't think younger people. What's strange about it too is that it felt very. Prophetic, like it was really sort of seeing how things are going to play out. And I think it was pretty accurate on some of those viewpoints, like the whole AI thing and all that sort of stuff and Siri and whatever. But that part of it, the technology angle, obviously was just a way to talk about how human beings tried to connect with other people. And like Jones, he says this in all the interviews. He's like, yeah, the technology thing was cool and interesting, but it's really just a cipher or a platform to talk about how people find intimacy and romance and all those sort of things. And I think from that perspective, it still works. It just has such a strange ending. And the final 20 minutes of it or whatever, when he finds out that his AI is talking to all these other people and she's in love with like 600 other people, I don't know what that's saying, right? Like that part of it to me is sort of just confusing. I guess in my mind, as I'm rewriting the movie, I would sort of be like, well, why would it matter to him? You know what I mean? Like deep down, because if he's getting the fulfillment out of this interaction, I think an actual person would be like, yeah, who cares? I'm getting what I want out of it.
I think I have an answer for that.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think out of all of the movie, the ending is what really resonated with me more this time than it did the first time 10 years ago. And once again, I have to really try to like divorce any negative feelings I have about Joaquin from this answer.
Let's be honest, after Joker, we can just call him a dirtbag.
Okay, thank you. And this is also the time period where the whole like "I'm still here" thing is happening with Casey Affleck, and Spike Jonze is complicit in that too. To be honest,
yikes! I didn't know that. Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Because they're all like hanging out all the time together.
Yeah. I'm sure that
Okay. Anyways. That aside, the character of Theodore, right? Theo? He, in my mind, represents this kind of on the cusp kind of generation where it's like, and that's, I think, maybe why it still resonates with like specifically our sector of like elder millennials, because it's like that whole thing of like we had a mostly technology-free childhood, but then adolescence, it was just like thrown into overdrive, right?
Yep.
And I see that happening with his character in this film, where it's like, especially through, I mean, it's mostly through flashbacks because we don't actually see any real time experience with him and his his ex-wife, who, and interesting, and ends up being his actual wife in real life, Rooney Mara, right? They end up
I didn't know
having,
they're married.
yeah, they had a son named River together, which is like the only cute thing about Joaquin Phoenix. And God, I gotta stay away. Okay, so he represents that on the cusp, and he gets drawn in. Like he has like these predilections once again to be like drawn in and become obsessive over the technology that is cutting edge, that is taking over the world. And yet he still has these ingrained feelings of monogamy. And we see that through the flashbacks too. He does not, right? And not to, be glib about it, but like there is like this element of maybe like hookup culture that is being represented by the AIs, where they have this kind of more openness. Like this is also around the time it was prophetic, not only in terms of like technology, but it was also prophetic in terms of like lifestyles. Like open marriages became a lot more part of like mainstream understanding of how relationships can be, polycules and all that stuff. And so like he is once again tormented by this inability to, quote, lock somebody down, even when it's like literally a possession of his, right? And ScarJo just says, "Fuck off! I'm gonna go be in love with 600 people."
Or like a ghost with a physics professor. I can't remember who she falls in love with at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, the philosopher. Yeah,
an amalgamation of a dead philosopher.
Yeah,
that's a very strong point, and it's also kind of interesting when you say it like. Yeah, like the elder millennial thing, because it is, if you think about it, like think about how like boomers, like when they got Facebook, like lost their minds, right? It's like politics and photos. It's like, no, you can't like share all this stuff online, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Right.
Maybe it's the same like for like, cuspers, Gen Xers, whatever, old millennials with like the romance relationship thing being online, because we didn't, we never had that. Even in our like early 20s and mid 20s, like that wasn't really that prominent. Whereas now it's sort of like, well, yeah, of course you're going to meet your spouse or partner online. That's just a given at this point for the most part. And I think for us, it still feels like we're maybe holding on to some old principles or ideas or morals or social norms. Where we're going to be very awkward, just like someone's aunt is ranting about Trump or COVID on Facebook. It's like we're doing that version of that with romance and sort of online relationships and stuff like that. That's funny about this. It brings up just a memory of mine. I was in Atlanta on Bumble, which is a dating app thing, and this is not that long ago. This is like right before I moved, and I was, you go on a date with a girl here and there, and one girl was like, "Oh, I'm actually traveling for work. Do you want to do like a video thing?" And I'm like,
"Whoa,
no," but like I'll do it because like I don't know.
This was before COVID or during COVID?
This is 2021, so this is like the later 2021, and
so people aren't doing a lot of video stuff.
She actually worked for the CDC. And because it was in Atlanta, and she was in like a foreign country training them how to do COVID stuff.
Wow.
And I had this video in this like morning where she's at and like afternoon. It's like over in like South Pacific. And it was so awkward and bizarre. And I am not an awkward or bizarre person. If you meet me in person, you're a total stranger. I could be your friend in like 5 minutes. I'm one of those types of people, right? And like, it was just like the strangest thing, but she was younger. She was probably like 32 or something like that. So like 8 years younger than me. And it was just sort of like I could feel it. It was this generational divide where it was like, oh, like I don't really belong in that world. And like, it's like one of those things where it's just so different. And I get the feeling that like that, and that's maybe why this movie doesn't ring as true to younger people. Right. Where it's just sort of like, well, obviously you're going to date, you're going to have Samantha, you're going to have another, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying in terms, because I don't know young people that well, but like, it feels like the world has changed so much in the last decade that like this movie maybe has a little bit of a less sort of cultural richness to it or something. It just doesn't maybe speak to them as well. But I think it's still a decent movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm curious now to like add it to my my romance unit at for film studies in high school, because I think that it would be very interesting to see if, in particular, like the whole tension with the Olivia Wilde character that he goes out on a date with while he is falling for Samantha. And then
God, I thought that was so insulting. That whole, I thought that was so weird, dude.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
And also like the relationship that actually hit me harder this time than Theo and Samantha was Amy Adams' character and Theo. And I had completely like, that is like one of those things that actually does feel universal, not specific to any generation. This concept of, you know, and there's also this wholesomeness to it, right? And it, once again, like I think that Spike Jonze does manage to balance that pretty well. Like these two are just like they had some kind of history in college or whatever, but like they're platonic friends and they truly care for each other. And that final shot of them after both of their AI partners have left them for this whatever digital orgy in the sky are just sitting side by side without access to technology, like on the rooftop.
Cute.
Yeah,
super cute, which I didn't love. I'll be honest. I just thought that, come on, like the movie. There's like, oh man, I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it more, this movie, there's a lot of problems with this movie. You're right. It is very wholesome and cute, but like the Olivia Wilde sequence, it felt very strange to me. And then the Rooney Mara stuff,
no, didn't work for you.
It kind of feels sexist. I mean, it just does.
Yeah,
and I bring that up. This is all set up, by the way. I bring that up because in this Vulture article that came out when the movie came out, they interviewed Spike Jonze, and it's crazy how this movie kind of came to be. It's actually based on this photograph of this photographer, Todd Hido, I think he's from Ohio, I think. He has a photograph called 2563, and it is the image of a young woman looking away from the camera in like a forest, and all you see is like the back of her head. And apparently, like as he was conceptualizing this movie, he kept going back to this picture over and over again, and he would write like a Post-it note and put it on the picture. This is like a big picture in his house. And then he finally, after doing this multiple times, he lands up with a Post-it note that just says her on it. And it's just sort of like, you think about that and you're like, oh, that makes so much more sense in this movie, because look, it is a male gaze movie. 100% a male gaze movie. But that doesn't necessarily make it a terrible piece of art or anything like that, or it doesn't even make it a bad piece of art. But it does have this sort of locked in syndrome where everything is coming from Theo, Spike Jonze. His perspective, and like the way that we see the women is sort of just like, I don't know. I think that's the thing that doesn't play, because back then I probably had the same viewpoint. 100%.
Right. Yeah.
Like I was one of those guys who's just like overly romantic, maybe put women on a pedestal, and then when they don't do what you want them to do, they're terrible, that whole thing. And now we know with age and stuff like that, I kind of don't have that viewpoint anymore. And so that's where I think there's a little bit of a separation now between the movie, where it's sort of like, oh, this doesn't feel as poignant as I thought it did.
Right. No, that makes sense. It's interesting. This comes up a lot in this show, because what I found in my research, Spike Jonze said to SBS, which is like the Australian CNN, he said to them, the initial spark was an article I saw online 10 years ago where you could have an instant message with an artificial intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
So a smarter child, for anybody that also shares the AOL instant messenger days, which was that whole thing, like the same kind of thing like you were mentioning with the novelty of talking to Siri or talking to Alexa, but a typed out version. So like, and he went on to say that he didn't think of it for a long time, and then I had this idea of a man having a relationship with a thing like that, a fully formed consciousness, and what would happen. I use that as a way to write a relationship movie and love story, and I think that's kind of, mean, you bring a completely fair point about the male gaze aspect of this, and I do have like a couple moments that I think of. For instance, that when he meets up to finally sign the divorce papers with Rooney Mara's character, where it just feels like, oh my, we are so like in his brain.
Yeah.
But I do think that like that's kind of one of the things where I don't know, Spike Jonze also is really good at did this, I think, very well in a very different context, but in the Where the Wild Things Are movie, where like even the most innocent and pure characters have this kind of disgruntled jadedness to them, and even like the outwardly jaded, disgruntled characters have this kind of innocence to them. I'm thinking of also that scene of them on the double date. I'm using air quotes with Chris Pratt's character and the girlfriend, where it's like there are these like it's supposed to. I think there's an intention there for us to like question like what is going on with like this kind of relationship building, fake versus genuine, this kind of power dynamic of I don't know. It's a curio from a time, and I think that it would be fascinating to hear some of these perspective that's younger seeing a movie like this for the first time.
The thing about a movie like this is like, there's male gaze, but it's a complicated. It's not like it's not like The Ugly Truth or whatever the hell that movie was with you know what I'm talking about. Gerard Butler and Katherine Heigl. There's so many different, like he's an intellectual guy and he's trying to sort of wrestle. He wrote like a musing on technology and romance and love, and it's like it's his perspective, and it is what it is, and like that's how we engage with it in the discourse. It's a guy's perspective, and how he thought this was all going to play out, and his viewpoint of love and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely worth
So is I mean, I haven't seen it. Is Jexy the more feminist version of her?
Jexy, which I have seen.
Oh, you have seen? Oh, God,
of course I've seen Jexy. Are you kidding me? That's not like a month ago. A terrible movie. Oh God, it's bad.
Looks so bad.
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some meat on the bone with her.
Full circle.
Bones and all. Maybe in time, people go back to it and sort of think, I doubt it though.
Will the metaphor reveal itself?
Yeah, over time, like maybe like Generation Alpha, where the hell they're called when they're like under 10 years old or whatever. Oh
my gosh. Okay, I have to say this before we close out. I just Googled for the first time Bones and All metaphor, and the first result is Luca G once again giving another answer, saying that he used the familiar horror element of cannibalism as a metaphor for those fighting with addiction, obsession, and a search for identity.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know.
Oh my God.
I don't know, man.
Where do we so Risqué Romance. Let's think about this in broad terms here. First of all, any new movies from the ones that we watched that we love? I think you mentioned Taste of Honey.
Yeah.
Right. That was, I think both of us really loved that movie.
And My Beautiful Laundrette was another big find.
Also a great, because I never even heard of that movie before. That was really great. You love Harold and Maude, but you've always loved Harold and Maude.
True.
Badlands to me is like, oh God, Terry Malick, man. There's something about that guy. He's like, I don't know how that was such a tightrope walk, that whole movie.
Oh, I know.
Valley Girl kind of went down in my book a little bit, because I remember it being, I mean, I have a weird view with it now. It's like, before I was like, oh, it's an 80s movie. But now I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, this is like a hyper indie movie. And then I view it through like a different lens. But like, it just, it's a very sort of interesting take on Romeo and Juliet. It's also Secretary. I mean, which we both have a very intertwined history with.
Yep.
That, like, I don't know, man. I completely flipped my view on that movie.
Right. Same. Yeah.
Last time I saw it, Brokeback Mountain's still kind of the same. Lolita. Oh my God. Not good.
No.
I'm like, is that sacrilegious? Are we allowed to say that? We're gonna get like banned?
It's hands down Kubrick's worst film.
It's not a good movie. I don't know. Why would anybody think that's a good? I don't know, man.
It's I think, I mean, maybe it's interesting that we had this kind of inverse with the first and last episodes. The oldest and the newest film, Lolita, was like, this grand work of literature, unadaptable, that was attempted to be adapted by an auteur, and Bones and All is this like throwaway YA book that is attempted to be adapted by an auteur. It's a mess both ways.
That's
I will say you were mid move when I did the solo show with Lillian, Bound. That's the best movie of this whole series that
really
I came across, and I was interested in seeing it for a long time, but never really pulled the trigger. And it's an incredible film, and I just can't get over how much like that film, which seemed to be like a throwaway, like barely
thriller, right? That's how I always viewed it growing up. It's like, oh yeah, it's like something on front Skinamax or whatever.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the Wachowskis, for all their flaws over the years, they know how to make something indelible, and I don't love all their work, but I think I like Bound even better than the first Matrix now.
Interesting.
I really recommend anybody who hasn't seen it to check it out.
Did Poison Ivy hold up?
Oh no, that's just straight trash. Interesting trash, but yeah, and yeah. I mean, I think that's
Brokeback's so good.
And that, I think I have to reiterate something from the first episode, which is that we had this kind of divide in the series, right, where it's like the movies were risque romance as a genre because like the actual relationships were risque considering who the characters were and the time period, but then also like the whole like voyeur aspect of it too, where it's like movies like Brokeback and My Beautiful Laundrette, and there's nothing like inherently wrong with the relationships in those movies, morally, legally, otherwise, maybe legally in some places, but it feels like we still have like such an intertwined connection between like movies where it's like, oh, that's a controversial movie and it's just because they're gay, versus like that's a controversial movie because like he's literally grooming a teenager. Like
that's a very super good point, because like thinking about that's why I was like sort of, this is a tough cycled, because it was very hard to define what the hell we were talking about half the time. Like what risque, what does that mean? And like even romance, remember we had an argument about whether Lolita was a romance movie or not,
right, because
it was a big thing.
It was a horror movie.
But it is interesting how some of these movies, like I would put Secretary in this sort of lot where it was risque because of how they choose to express their love.
Right. And the public perception of that style of expression. Yeah.
But now I think sexual mores have changed so much that like Secretary seems kind of tame. I'm just thinking of like the proliferation of like pornography over the last 20 years. It's like, Secretary is like, like a PG-13 movie almost.
That's the other thing is like we've gotten so far to the other side that in order to make something stand out as risque, you have to have literally cannibals falling in love with each other
and eating full body, eating Mark Rylance on screen. But yeah,
we didn't even mention the scene with Michael Stuhlbarg and David Gordon Green, of all people.
Which that could be a whole nother hour show.
I
still don't get that scene. I don't get anything about it. Weird scene. I don't get it. I just don't get anything about it. Also, throw out, we could have lumped in The Crying Game in this cycle. Same thing that you're kind of mentioning. Risque in the time for that. The relationship that goes on that, but the movie itself treats it normally.
Right.
Treats this sort of just like just matter of fact. My Beautiful Laundrette the same way. Mm-hmm. Yes, a movie about two men who are have a romantic relationship with each other, but like within the context of the movie, it's just what they do.
Right. There's and it's it's like the C story to these other two stories about class and race.
Fascinating. Yeah. Really fascinating movie. Do we want to tease the next cycle?
Let's do it. We got it pretty much mapped out, but
I'm missing a movie. I don't know.
You're missing a pick, and I'm still considering swapping a couple of mine.
The Terminal.
Yeah, we finally hit a Spielberg movie, and it's the fucking Terminal. You're welcome.
Worst Spielberg movie.
Never seen it. I can't wait.
Oh my god, it's not. Well, it's okay. stranger than fiction is what we're going to go with on this one. And it's going to be movies that are sort of, we haven't really like sort of landed on the bullseye, but like movies about true stories or inspired by true stories that kind of run with it. And we the Cocaine Bear. I think we're going to do it like the new one first, probably, right? And then kind of go backwards. So that's probably going to be the first movie is Cocaine Bear, which is coming out late February. But yeah, that'll be, what is that? I think we're in season 10, by the way.
Woo!
Season 10 of Film Trace. So if you have been listening, we appreciate you listening and love your support. And, check us out wherever. We're getting a lot of people on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. Loving it on there. Any closing thoughts, Chris? I'll leave it to you.
Oh man, I think we just need to say like I think we're trying to bite off more than we can chew by going from risque romance movies to movies that are about things that you wouldn't believe to be true but are, and it'll be really difficult to reconcile the main argument, which in my belief is going to be that movies maybe should not dramatize real events.
Oh, well, that's a crazy argument. But that is, listen to season 10 of Film Trace. There's your tease. Thanks, everybody. This has been Film Trace.